All right. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Ron Daniels. I am president of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century and convener of the National African American Reparations Commission, and delighted to be the facilitator of the HR-40 strategy group, guided and led by the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee, our fearless leader, who has led us to this historic moment and this historic time. I welcome you to this virtual rally, HR-40 on the move, because we're on the move. And we're on the move because of the collective work of a strategy group that's been meeting for 90 weeks. That's right. Black folks coming together to meet for 90 weeks, because that's just how important this is. Now, in order to get this started, we have a reparations anthem. And that reparations anthem is put together by none other than Sounds of Blackness. You know them. They're multi-Grammy Award winning artists. They're dedicated to working for the movement. And the person who is the creative director for Sounds of Blackness is responsible for that tune you just heard, but is also responsible for an anthem that we're going to be pushing out called Time for Reparations. So I just want to introduce Gary Hines so he can also introduce our reparations theme, our reparations anthem, and then we're going to get right to our invocation and move this rally forward. Gary Hines, you have the floor. You're on mute, Mr. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you so much. Little technical difficulty there, but bless you. Thank you so much on behalf of Sounds of Blackness.
Well, we want you to introduce the reparations song. Just tell us a word about it, why you did it, and then we're gonna play it to kick things off.
Yes, sir. Time for Reparations is the anthem for the movement for reparations. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that it's a new movement. You and I know that it began in 1865, and actually even before then. And every aspect of our movement for social justice, for humanity, has had an anthem, whether it's We Shall Overcome for civil rights, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud for the Black Power movement, Black Lives Matter by Sounds of Blackness for the Black Lives Matter movement, and now for reparations, this is the anthem for the movement.
All right. Well, let's cue it up and hear Time for Reparations. Let's get this rally started. All right, Sounds of Blackness. We thank you so much for bringing that song to us. Typically, what we would do is start with invocation, but I really wanted to get that reparations anthem out there first. I hope the Lord and our ancestors will forgive us for that, but I think they understand that, you know, we've been waiting for a long time for reparations. And so on this occasion, this virtual rally, HR-40 on the move, I think they will, they'll forgive us for having done that reparations song first. Now to bring the invocation for this occasion and for remarks, none other than Reverend Audreia Alexandra. She is our go-to faith leader. You have been with us from the very beginning. We so appreciate your leadership. Time and time again, at the request of the Congresswoman, you have put on special symposia, you have organized special events, and just relentlessly been about the business of organizing the faith community to get this work done. So whenever we have wanted to know what to do in the faith community, no disrespect to anybody else, it has been you, Reverend Alexander, that we've come to for your guidance, for your wisdom, your courage. And so we thought it appropriate on this occasion that you give remarks and the benediction. So you now have the floor.
Remarks and the invocation or opening prayer. And I will say that prayer is about conversation with God. So that reparation song is an opening. Thank you for this invitation. And as you noted, I serve as the Associate General Secretary for Action and Advocacy for the National Council of Churches of Christ in the USA, and been representing the NCC at the HR-40 strategy table from the beginning, at the forefront of advocacy for reparations on behalf of people of African descent. America has a truth problem. In a couple of weeks, people will commemorate Juneteenth, where we celebrate coming to terms with the lie that enslaved persons in Texas endured for 2 additional years after emancipation. They continue to toil the land of their enslavers under the lash of the whip and deprivation of their freedom because they had been lied to. Today is the 101st anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, where white domestic terrorists attacked the Black community for being prosperous and living out their version of the American dream. America has a truth problem. The doctrine of discovery, manifest destiny, American exceptionalism, the hierarchy of whiteness and patriarchy are all in this nation's DNA. They are lies. America has a truth problem. These principles are grounded in the misinterpretation of Christian, biblical, and theological beliefs that deny the very image of God reflected in every human being, and thereby denies God's existence. And that, my friend, is blasphemous, a sin for which this nation must account for. Reparatory justice includes acknowledging the truth of an injustice, repenting, and making right the wrong, and committing to transformational changes that ensure we don't repeat those wrongs. HR-40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposal for African Americans Act, is a tool to start that process. America has a truth problem. Race is a myth, a construct that defines culture and skin color to relegated caste systems of value. Race is a myth, but racism is real. America has a truth problem. Jesus told us that the truth will set you free. It is always the right thing to do what is right. Passing this bill right now is right, and we can't continue to wait for justice. Justice does not have to be something that we are constantly looking for. Why is it that we as Black people are constantly begging for our freedom? What we don't have is a willingness by those who by any means necessary want to do all that they can to continue to wield power. It will take prophetic revolutionary imagination and the power of God that is within us to lead us to truth that will set us all free. Let us pray. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, God who has brought us thus far on the way. We have come over a way that with tears has been slaughtered. We've come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. And God, all of us today who will come before this great cloud of witnesses with our ancestors, we are all American citizens. We are residents of this nation. And we have been subjected to the sin of dehumanization, subjected of the sin that our color is different, that which is relegated our culture and our skin to something that is less than. But we come now in a unified voice, God, asking that righteousness and justice will prevail, that justice will roll like righteousness and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. We're reminded of our ancestor, Fannie Lou Hamer, who said that no one is free until we're all free. We're seeking freedom. And God, we're calling upon this nation to a reckoning, and with truth will prevail. And in that truth, it's not just an acknowledgement, God, but a transformation of hearts and minds. There is a lack of willingness. There is a lack of conversion. There is an evil in the air that fails to see your divine presence in all of those who you have created in your divine image. Bless not just this gathering, but the work that we have been doing, and not just us, even before us, from as far back as those who left those enslaved spaces and said, you owe us for the free labor, for the blood, the sweat, the tears. We now, God, joining those voices crying out for freedom, crying out for justice, reparatory justice, acknowledgement, repentance, transformational change. And that those who believe in their hearts somehow that dehumanizing others better, make things better for them, will come to understand and know that freedom, liberation, and the best of who we can be comes by all of us being able to live uninhibited in all of our God-given way of existence, and all the ways that you have created this mosaic of colors and voices and faces and gifts, that we will come together, because we are definitely indeed better together than we are separated. Bless the work of our hands and the spirit of our hearts and minds as we do this work. And let us all see you in us as you have created us. It is in the many names and the great manifestation of you, God, who is so great, that you reveal yourself in many facets, because you are God and God alone. Amen.
Amen and Ashe, and thank you for that liberating invocation. And now we are blessed to bring to the podium at this virtual rally. Across the nation, people are gathered in this virtual rally as we declare that Juneteenth is Reparations and Racial Justice Day, and that we want action on HR-40 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We want action by Juneteenth. The person who outlined that demand, who had the vision to talk about Juneteenth in that light, is actually the architect of the bill that created Juneteenth. And I'm here to tell you that John Conyers, our beloved John Conyers, he is smiling as he looks down on the person who he worked with for many years, who worked with her and who has shared the torch and now has inherited the torch. And I'm here to tell you that she is tireless. She is visionary. She's courageous. She is not going to let anybody turn us around. She's our fearless leader, the Honorable Sheila Jackson, lead sponsor on HR-40 and much more to bring us the keynote, to give us the vision of where we are and where we are need to be going, the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee. Let's give it up a virtual round of applause for our leader.
Let me celebrate this wonderful day. Let me announce and pronounce that this is a day of glory. What a wonderful dynamic hymn, gospel, spiritual, that Gary Hines has introduced in the time for reparations. And I would know that Reverend Audreia Alexandra just viewed that as the appropriate hymn before her momentous prayer. And so we know in faith institutions, those of us are Christian, but there are Muslims and there are people of Jewish faith and many other faiths. But in the Christian tradition, there is always, Brother Kamm, that hymn that comes before we begin to extol, to encourage, and to lift up. And so I've now proclaimed the time for reparations by the sounds of Blackness. That is our hymn. And I will utilize that in the historic commemoration of Juneteenth in Texas. And I encourage that song to go all over the nation, for that is what it is. I come today to build on the leadership of John Conyers and all the soldiers that have been on the battlefield since 1989. Delighted to say that from the moment I came to the United States Congress, shortly thereafter, I began to co-sponsor with Brother Congressman Chairman Conyers HR-40, the Commission to Study Slavery and Develop Reparation Proposals. You can't see it in its entirety because it's on white congressional paper, but all of these names are the largest number of co-sponsors ever in the history of this bill. 216, 217, and I believe growing. These are people who have committed from all parts of America, all political persuasions under the Democratic caucus, from moderates to conservatives, to progressives and others, have decided that this is the time for HR-40. Then who are we to say we will wait? That is why we can't wait. And we're certainly grateful to people like Erika Alexander, who worked so hard to encourage the effort that we were engaged in. John Conyers, we have mentioned, and his family, all of them were part of this. I'm delighted that the Congressional Black Caucus, now led by Congresswoman Beatty, all in and have listed this as their priority. The leadership, Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, Hakeem Jeffries, and Catherine Clark, and all of the whips, as I am a chief deputy whip, have been kind enough to be co-sponsors of this legislation, along with the Democratic Policy and Steering Committee and the Honorable Barbara Lee, who you will hear from. Momentous leadership. All of those leaders of the Democratic Policy and Steering Committee, which I sit on, are supportive of this legislation. And so, along with this letter that has evidenced 350 organizations of every faith, every social and political and civic and civil rights organization have put their name on this letter. Yeah, I like show and tell because I'm presenting it to the court, and the court are the people of the United States, all of you who are listening. So let me thank Color of Change, dynamically jumped in and reached audiences that we could not reach, as did the Human Rights Watch, reached audiences that we had not yet reached. The ACLU stood steadfastly on the Constitution and reminded us that the progressive movement and the understanding of the laws of this land would not let us wait on HR-40. Certainly the Centers for American Progress are elements who recognize the change. And then, of course, though I cannot name all, it is important to acknowledge our outstanding persons that you will hear, but I must mention Dr. Julianne Malveaux, along with the NAACP, the National Urban League, the National Action Network, and the National Coalition for Black Civic Participation, And I've already mentioned for you the Congressional Black Caucus. So what is my message today? It is similarly that Juneteenth, as I wrote the legislation, became the first member of Congress to introduce legislation to establish a federal holiday after, for a decade, introducing a congressional resolution, and finally achieved that last year as it was signed one day before Juneteenth. I always thought that Juneteenth should be a day of both somberness and sacredness, because my spirit behind HR-40 and joining Congressman Conyers and having him hand this baton to me, how honored I am, was that slavery deserves its honor, because for 246 years, human beings not judged as human beings by this Constitution were born into slavery, lived and were burdened by that, separated and snatched from the very origins of family, for some of us created by God, but put asunder by the structure of government to snatch babies, 6-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 17-year-olds, husband and wife as they called each other. They had no last names. They were first named by anything that the master could name them. They died in slavery, and their progeny were again born in slavery, and that was their life. Have we as Americans ever stopped to reconcile that life for 246 years? Have we ever reconciled that the underpinnings of the economic engine of America was developed by those who received no compensation, no insurance, no life insurance, no salary, no ability to have an egg nest, no ability to build that little home? We remember the story of America when it was told to those who were on the East Coast in the founding colonies, go west, young man or young woman. And they went, yes, and developed massive ownership of land. They built the little red schoolhouse, the general store, and a church. We never had that opportunity. The descendants of slaves, when freed after 1865 in its totality, General Sherman said 40 acres and a mule. But the politics of government, the new president, Johnson, came and imploded that and said they will get nothing. But yet, we made cotton king. We built the economic engine. We created the Wall Street banks. We created the commodity in Chicago. And we created and contributed to the transatlantic slave trade when the explorers said, spices and oils, let me put them aside. The wealth of getting human beings will make me wealthier than I could ever imagine. And they created wealth on the side of this new foundling nation, and then in Europe, they created a mountain of wealth. We continue to build the United States Capitol that this little Black girl walks in every day in complete awe. But I stand on the soil and the infrastructure that was built by slaves. The White House that every president has sat in and slept in was built by slaves. Washington, D.C. came up around their labor. And when it was hard work, as someone told me, when they wanted to build the very top of the Capitol, they used slaves because they were expendable when they fell to their death. And they kept sending them and sending them until they could build that very pinnacle of the United States Capitol. And so I believe it is crucial that we view this as an emotional moment, that we cannot wait. And we want the Congress and the White House to join us in raising their voices and getting this done now. And we're not angry such that we are in such a moment that we can't see clearly. We can. And just quickly, as I raise these points, so that you can know that we're standing on foundation of truth. First of all, let me say that I stand on 101 years of Tulsa. We were there for the 100th. I stand on the powerful existence of Leslie Benningfield Randall, now 107 years old. Viola Fletcher, a survivor of Tulsa, both of them 108 years old. I stand on the life of Hugh Van Ellis, World War II veteran, 101 years old. He was a baby. And I heard these words from him, that he was at war in Tulsa and no one bothered to give him a GI Bill then. And he was at war in World War II. And do you realize that there were Black soldiers that did not get the GI Bill? Because if your state viewed you as second class, you did not get it. But what else did you not get? I take the Constitution. Are you fully a recipient of the First Amendment? Or have those of us in this skin been denied free speech, been rounded up after the terrible killing of George Floyd and the commentary of our friends that they should be rounded up, they shouldn't be allowed to be protested. In this Capitol, there were hundreds arrested. Did we get the First Amendment? Did we get, in fact, the Fourth Amendment of the unreasonable search and seizure? Did Breonna Taylor have the right to not have an unreasonable search and seizure, coming into her home under the auspices of government without permission? Did we get due process, or was property taken away from us under the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment? Have we had a trial by our peers? Or is there tradition and history? Did Emmett Till get a trial? Did the three little boys in Mississippi get a trial? Did those in the Black Panther movement get a trial? There were many in the civil rights movement that saw no trial. And so this moment today is a reflection, let me be very clear, of the government's actions. This is not to seek any response to this from individuals other than individual Americans, other than their acknowledgement that slavery was wrong. And it was one of the original sins. But the government, even through the Bill of Rights, the 13th Amendment, they had to admit on the floor that their argument to eliminate slavery was not about the equality of the slaves. They had to convince the men in that chamber, we are not arguing about the equality of the slaves. They're not equal. But the law demands that we have slavery no more. 14th Amendment, as I said, on due process and the right to vote on the 15th Amendment, have we been completely made whole? No, because we need the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, because in the 21st century and the 20th century, we've been denied the right to vote. We are not free. Let me give you these final points to ensure that the urgency is here and that the 4 million who were enslaved and the descendants thereof, and the fact that in my state, General Granger had to come in 1865, which is the basis of Juneteenth, to free those of us who had not yet been freed. But let me quickly give you this point. It is evident that there is a wealth gap. You will hear 17,000 to 171,000. It is evident that if we had had reparations, it is evident through the Harvard study that we would not have suffered COVID, the African-American population, as deadly as they had suffered. It is evident that education is unequal for our communities. And it is evident that there are stars in our community, successful people. That should not be used as evidence that HR-40, the Commission to Study Slavery and to develop reparation proposals, is not crucially needed at this moment. The inequities are stark in health, education, and wealth, in housing and redlining. We have the facts. In the court of law and the court of equity, I can show you the data that has characterized African Americans in 2022. Then as we look to the fears now permeating through our community, in spite of every African American who has gone into the United States military, who are teachers, who are business persons, who are contributing to the economy, who are patriots who love this country, who stand with the flag, who love the Constitution, who pray for the sanctity and safety of this nation. African Americans do that every single day. We embrace our Hispanic brothers and Asian American brothers, our Anglo brothers. We embrace them all. We embrace all religions. We are loving people. And all we ask is that the nation accepts us for who we are and pointedly addresses what has been left and thrown to the side while we fight and work and give every day. And so as I close, let me remind you that as the people of Mother Emanuel were praying, Charleston, South Carolina, and they opened that door to a young white man, their lovingness said, "Come in and pray with us." They did not know and did not judge him that he had been filled with the hatred of wanting to start a race war. Not their fault. They were praying, descendants of enslaved Africans. They suffered hatred and racism, but they were loving. And then, of course, in Buffalo, New York, person who had been filled with the evilness of the replacement theory came and killed 10 African Americans. The most recent buried the last dynamic, beautiful person on last Saturday. Uvalde, hatred, children dead. We as African Americans embrace and love and reject that and mourn and cry for that loss. And so we ask simply that you give us a simple thing, and that those of you who are joining us in this rally, in this town hall meeting, let us do it with the spirit and the spirituality of our ancestors, and speak loudly that we can't wait for a day of justice and reparations. And I believe by Juneteenth, we will have that response that the nation and the world will see, and they will applaud it. As my colleague, the Honorable Barbara Lee, has joined me in, the world will say, "Ha, America is the nation that we should follow." They look back to heal and to fix, and they understood HR-40, the commission to develop reparations. Its time is now. God bless you all. Ashe.
Well, a rousing round of applause for our leader. We understand now why we follow her. She's just a jewel and carries the spirit of the ancestors and God with her as she pursues this righteous cause. And her remarks about the Honorable Congresswoman Barbara Lee are fitting, because this very proud sister has been by her side at every turn. And I'm honored to know her and to have known her back into the days of the Honorable Ronald V. Dellums, who was one of my very, very close friends. And I can remember her on the staff of Ronald V. Dellums. And we are also proud that she has not only honored his legacy, but built her own legacy, built on his legacy as a courageous, visionary, progressive legislator and leader who is about the business of truth telling and walking at the side with her sister, the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee. So let's now hear from Barbara Lee, the Congresswoman from California.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and I proudly represent California's beautiful 13th Congressional District, which includes Oakland and Berkeley, California. Let me take a minute to thank my colleague and good friend, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, for her tremendous leadership on HR-40 in carrying us to almost the finish line, and on so many other issues of racial justice that Congresswoman Jackson Lee continues to fight for. And let me thank all of our musical guests, our speakers, and to everyone joining this call to action. Now, we all celebrated when last year President Biden made Juneteenth a national holiday, thanks to Congresswoman Jackson Lee and, yes, to all of you. It was on this day in 1865 that Union soldiers arrived in Galveston, Texas, which is the home of my grandfather and great-grandmother, to announce our freedom 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Enslaved Black people waited 2.5 years to learn of their freedom. Yet since then, systemic racism, economic injustice, white supremacy, lynchings, massacres, mass incarceration, and all forms of racial injustice continue until this very single day. We cannot wait any longer for reparations and the passage of HR-40 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Bill. African Americans have been fighting for real justice and repairing the damage of white supremacy for much too long. Many of you know, now I know that our great warrior Ron Daniels knows that as a congressional staffer many decades ago, I worked with our beloved fighter for racial justice, Congressman Ron Dellums, and of course Congressman John Conyers on reparations. The time is now, under the bold and brilliant leadership of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, to get this done. Domestic terrorism against Black people is rooted in what President Biden has correctly called the poison of white supremacy. Communities that have been victims of the evils of white supremacy have fought for justice. We are not waiting any longer. We cannot wait any longer. We need HR-40. We need reparations now. Thanks to the tireless work of Congresswoman Jackson Lee and these dedicated, fearless, multi-generational coalition gathered here today, after 30 years, we finally secured an unprecedented 218 yes votes for HR-40. Juneteenth must not become just another holiday. Juneteenth must become a day to organize action on the unfinished racial justice agenda of Black America, which is reparations. And yes, this is a political struggle. Criminal justice restructuring is on the ballot in November. Voting rights is on the ballot in November. HR-40, reparations, is on the ballot in November. Black voters are demanding that candidates not only say Black Lives Matter, but support these policies if they mean it. If they don't get our vote. If not now, when? Now is the time to get HR-40 to President Biden's desk to sign into law. Yes, we will celebrate Juneteenth, and yes, we will declare that Juneteenth is Reparation and Racial Justice Day. Thank you.
You're on mute, Dr. Daniels.
It's fully on board. Are you hearing me now? I'm okay. Testing. All right.
Yay, boy.
All right. Okay. So now moving right along. As I said before, we have amassed an incredible amount of support for HR-40. The Congresswoman has outlined it. Congresswoman Barbara Lee did likewise. None of this really would have been possible without the dedicated service of leaders like the person I'm about to introduce now, who is a major thought leader, a major advocate, a major organizer, who has relentlessly been pushing on this legislation, pushing to get us over the goalposts time and time again. He is the former male co-chair of Encobra, and now comes to us with Reparations United. Would you please welcome Camm Howard, who is a leading member of the HR-40 strategy group. And again, without his fearless, tireless leadership, we would not be here. Camm, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels, and definitely want to thank Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Congresswoman Barbara Lee for their very strong and powerful comments. You know, Dr. Daniels, I've been to quite a few reparation rallies, and we would always start the rally with the call and response, reparations now, reparations now. But with our introduction by our brother Gary Hines, we have to escalate that to reparations right now. Time for reparations. Reparations right now. Time for reparations. As we approach Juneteenth, we do so with the expectation of an additional reason for celebration. Why? Because HR-40 is on the move. Thanks to the tremendous leadership of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, the push for reparations from the federal government is no longer, quote unquote, a political non-starter. It was on Juneteenth, 2019, the year she first introduced the legislation, having been passed at the time by her mentor, John Conyers, that the entire country had to talk about reparations. Why? Because HR-40 was on the move. The Subcommittee on the Constitution and Civil Rights held a congressional hearing on that historic date. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Danny Glover, and Dr. Julianne Malveaux were some who gave testimony. It was followed by a second congressional hearing in February of 2021. And we must not fail to mention the historic vote on April 14th of that same year as Congresswoman Jackson Lee marshaled this bill to a successful vote in the House Judiciary Committee. However, she was not alone. On the Senate side, Senator Cory Booker gave us an unprecedented Senate companion bill to HR-40, S-1083, now being introduced as S-40. Nearly 220 of their congressional colleagues in the House and Senate have openly and vocally still with them, offering tremendous argument in their own right for the necessity of HR-40 and S-40 now. Powerful national organizations came together in 2018 under the name the HR-40 Strategy Group to move this bill into law. For the last 90 consecutive weeks or 21 straight months, we have met for that purpose. Collectively, we have brought together hundreds of national organizations, ethnic and faith-based allies, corporations and businesses, foundations and institutions, prominent scholars, journalists, lawyers, and even local leaders into this effort. We all stand here today on our way to Juneteenth celebrations proclaiming, yes, HR-40 is on the move. And in addition, we stand collectively on our just demand that HR-40 must move forward to enactment at this very time. We can't wait any longer. We are saying to this government, it has both harmed us and has refused to address the harm to our community for far too long. The injuries suffered and those of which we continue to suffer cannot wait for another generation, cannot wait for another administration, and certainly cannot wait for another till we get past another midterm election in order to engage in repair. The commitment to redress these injuries must begin now. There's no data that shows that these harms and injuries can or will be addressed without the targeted federal resources in a full comprehensive plan that only the HR-40 Commission, as detailed in the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, can achieve. This nation's salvation lies in the righting of historic and contemporary wrongs committed against Black people in America. The African American vote in this democracy is a moral vote. It's a just vote. It's an inclusive vote. Without our vote, America will sink deeper into an amoral, unjust, ultra-tribal system of escalating hatred and violence as we are experiencing at this very moment. To steer this country away from that future, we say that this government, HR-40, must move into enactment now, and Juneteenth is the opportune day to make that announcement. Asante Sana, Eluda Continua, Pomoja Mbili Shaka, many thanks. The struggle continues. Together, we will win. Reparations right now. Time for reparations. Thank you.
All right. What a wonderful, powerful, powerful, powerful oration from Camm Howard. Reparations United. And folks, you are a part of this rally. You are a part of this virtual rally. You are a part of this gathering called by the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee, the Reparations Strategy Group, the different voices that you're hearing to push us over the top, to push us forward. We're going to get this done. We have to get this done. HR-40 is on the move. Juneteenth is the day. It's not just going to be a party day and just a day just to be hanging out. We want Juneteenth to be Reparations and Racial Justice Day. Now, there's no more powerful organization in terms of being in Washington, D.C. to move this forward. I call the next gentleman Godfather, and I call him that, lovingly and whatever. But I also do it metaphorically in this sense. Anybody who knows about the NAACP, they have another fancy name for it. I'm from back in the day. I remember it simply being called the Washington Bureau, right? If you said the Washington Bureau, the NAACP, it's like everybody stops and listens. Why? Because within these circles, different people have their lobbies and their advocacy groups, but everybody knows that the key voice that people circle around in a united front is the Washington Bureau. It's for advocacy, all that, them fancy names that I forgot about, but it'd be the NAACP Power Center in Washington, D.C. And the person who heads that up is a longtime friend. He is in the spirit of those who have preceded him, like Wade Henderson and others who are legendary. And he is a legend in the sense that he gets it done. He's relentless. He knows how to navigate. He knows how to compromise. He knows how to when to hold them and to fold them and to move forward. And that's none other than the person who leads the Washington Bureau. He'll give you the right title of the NAACP. And he's been with us every step of the way and played an instrumental role of getting us to this point. Would you please welcome Hilary Shelton of the NAACP?
Thank you very much, Dr. Ron. I really appreciate that very warm and overly generous introduction. We've known each other for a while, and as much as you have not changed one bit in how young and vibrant you look, my hair is quite white as I continue to age. But let me just begin by saying, first, I'm deeply honored. First, by that very generous introduction, but also by those who came before me today, working on the issue of addressing reparations and the need to celebrate Juneteenth by declaring Reparations Day, a day of racial justice. It's extremely important that we think about all that has happened, the damage it's done, and the issues that are before us. That's why as we begin to have this conversation, I want to say on behalf of our organization, our 2,200 membership units, over 500,000 card-carrying members, and the millions of people that are members of the NAACP, whose membership may have not still be up to date, but nonetheless, their contributions to the work of the NAACP is still very front and center. We're honored to be here because we're also following another of our great leaders, someone that has provided so much support for the issues, the challenging issues of our day, as a matter of fact, without blinking, without hesitating, without stopping in any way, but consistently moving forward with the grace and dignity that is Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Her work with us and through us, her time spent at NAACP meetings, conventions, and otherwise, as we not only set our agenda, but move our agenda forward, is second to none. And also, of course, having come right behind her, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who's also been a longtime advocate for the NAACP's agenda, not only in Washington here, but also back home in California, is someone that we highlight, we certainly celebrate their great work and leadership. We could not be where we are if we didn't have people that were willing to take the mantle as they have and help move these issues forward, again, without hesitation. So we're very grateful for those leaders that have moved us along these ways, but those that we also join from all over the country. You heard from Camm just a moment ago and the great work being done by Reparations United. Dr. Daniels, you also know that joining us in so many ways are those that will be speaking before this is over, but organizations like the National Urban League, the National Action Network, the National Coalition for Black Civic Participation, and so many others. But one of the extraordinary things about this particular issue is it's not just supported by the victims of slavery. It's supported by those who've experienced very similar things in different ways in this country, but understand that interconnection. When I think about the support that we receive on this bill and on this issue from our friends that have addressed the issue of the plight of Native Americans in our country, the National Congress of American Indians, and those that help move anti-discrimination legislation on Capitol Hill for our friends in the Native American community. For those who recognize what happened to Japanese during the so-called internment period, in which they were actually taken out of their homes and businesses because of who they were, and of course, coming out damaged, having their businesses lost, resources taken, many lives were lost in those so-called internment camps as well. They recognize and understand how awful a misguided government can be, and how important it is for all of us to fight together for democracy, making sure that that very important concept is clearly and very much still with us. So as we think about HR-40, we're thinking about it in many ways very similarly. It was important for us to lift up Juneteenth celebrations. That is important to recognize. And as much as we use the term celebrate, commemorate is also an extremely important term for us to use along these lines. Never forget that it was there. Never forget the problems that it made for us then, but never forget the residuals of those problems that we are still living with today. As we think about HR-40, again, what we're thinking about is those damages that were done. We recognize the transatlantic slave trade, but we also recognize, even in the bill, and I give a great deal of thanks to Congressman John Conyers for recognizing it even as he introduced the bill. That if you're going to talk about the transatlantic slave trade and the damages done, you got to talk about Jim Crow too. You've got to talk about how those damages were moved to a whole different point. As we experience those concerns along those lines. We also have to think about what happened under the Black codes, as we know that very clearly African Americans and those who even appear to be African Americans were treated so unfairly, so harshly, so discriminatorily. We know that those things happened. They were part of our past, but quite frankly, we know through this bill, they're part of our presence as well. We know when we look at the data, as Congresswoman Jackson Lee raised so eloquently, the data of how African Americans, those of former servitude and the descendants thereof, are treated today. As we look at the real data, the real facts, we know we have problems that still need to be solved, and we're not willing to recognize there are a problem, and quite frankly, who is responsible for not only the problem as it happened, but the damages that were done and even the residual damages we're living with today. That's why it's so important that a commission is going to be created. That's why it's so important that under that commission, we're able to travel throughout the country, but not limit ourselves to our borders, because we know the implications of the transatlantic slave trade did not begin and end on the shores of the United States of America. There were those that very well benefited in ways that did not pay their fair share and must be involved in us being able to solve this age-old problem that's still with us today. So Dr. Daniels, Brother Howard, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, Congresswoman Lee, and so many others, we know this bill has gone further than any bill like this has ever gone before. And now is not the time for us to stop. We know that this is a bill that's gotten support from those of various races and ethnicities, those coming from various places throughout our country and outside the country. Yes, we have visited with the United Nations about these issues as well. And yes, there's support for the need for reparations coming from other countries throughout the world as well. So let me stop there and say it's so important that we're sending this signal now and today, that we continue to work with our friends, our relatives, our others that are involved with this issue, and not only the federal level, but the state and local level. The fight has to be made there, and the issues have to be derived from the outcome of the hearings that we're hoping to see held as part of this commission's work. So with that, I want to thank all those that have gotten us here to this day, at this time, at this moment. And we look forward at the NAACP to first reaffirming our support for this bill yet again. We supported HR-40 from its first introduction by Congressman John Conyers during his years on Capitol Hill in Washington, and we've reaffirmed our position supporting the need for this bill, the need for the commission, and the need for us to finally have a very scientific approach to addressing the damages done and the hurt that was had. So thanks again, Dr. Daniels. The NAACP stands close by and ready to march as well. And thank you, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, for having the courage to continue to raise this issue. When those would actually talk about how unnecessary, we don't need to be talking about providing this kind of approach to solving the problems that are still so evident in our community through this evidence. Congresswoman Jackson Lee stands up with the grace and dignity that she continues to do, makes the point clear as she's tightening her walking shoes as we begin to march to address this issue and make sure that America lives up to its responsibilities. And the Constitution is not just some feeble words on a piece of paper. So thanks again, and we look forward to the fight.
Well, thank you very much, Godfather. And because you have that gray hair and all that stuff, I gave you a little grace, but for the rest of the people, you can't take the same privileges of Hilary Shelton, because I will, I'll sort of gingerly remind you that you don't be the Godfather. But anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You get the point of the passion and the power of the tremendous work that is being done. This is a tremendous rally. We appreciate all of you out there who are looking on. This is a historic day that you've joined us from all different platforms, all different organizations who have worked collaboratively to build this audience. And we are moving forward with Juneteenth. You've heard it time and time again. We're not turning back. Juneteenth is the day. And now we'd like to hear from another ally who's been with us from the very beginning. See, what happens is people back in the day, you know, they would talk about the legacy organizations like they were like not really down with the stuff, right? But that the legacy organizations, you know, I will tussle with Hilary a little bit. I'll tussle with Morial a little bit. But we know that at the end of the day, on this issue, there's a united front. And I'm proud to know Marc Morial. Every time we've called on Marc Morial, he stepped up to the plate. And he stepped up to the plate again. And he's with us today to let us know that he's 100% behind HR-40. Let's now hear from the president and CEO of the National Urban League, none other than Marc Morial.
I'm Marc Morial, and I'm proud to serve as president of the National Urban League. Today, I want to speak to you about HR-40. HR-40, of course, is the proposal to create a national commission to study and evaluate reparations. The late, great Congressman John Conyers introduced this bill way back in the late 1980s. And Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, the incomparable and energetic, dynamic member of Congress from the great city of Houston, has become the lead champion for that effort in the past few years. It is so critical that at this moment, in the aftermath of the tragedy in Buffalo, 2 years after the murder of George Floyd, and in a time when this nation grapples with racial justice, but while grappling with racial justice, we witnessed this backlash, white supremacy and nationalism, that now is the time for HR-40 to be enacted. We cannot wait one more moment. That's why so many of us in the national civil rights community are joining together. And we want to thank our good friend and longtime champion and expert on reparations, Dr. Ron Daniels, for his leadership, and for the Institute of the Black World's continued stewardship of the policy, the idea, and the research underpinnings of HR-40. We know that slavery, the peculiar, unusual, barbaric institution, held our ancestors captive as property for over 250 years on the North American continent. We know the Titanic War, the Civil War that it took to end slavery, and the changes to the Constitution. And we know the betrayal of the period after the Reconstruction era, where a new form of slavery, that being segregation, was put into place and sustained itself until the civil rights struggles of the 1960s. Reparations is nothing new as a fundamental overriding concept. The United States paid reparations to formerly interned Japanese citizens after World War II, after the tragedy of those internment camps. Haiti was forced to pay reparations to France after its independence revolution in the late 1700s and the early 1800s, when, get this, the Haitian government and the people of Haiti were made to pay reparations to slave owners, an act that crippled and undermined Haitian development for over 100 years and still impacts that nation to today. What are reparations about? They're about justice. They're about recompense. They're about a fundamental understanding that we must turn the corner on systemic racism. And for us to undertake a careful, thoughtful, and also wide-ranging examination of reparations, HR-40 would do that, and the time has absolutely come. So Sheila Jackson Lee, we're with you in your corner. Dr. Ron Daniels, we appreciate your leadership. My colleagues, Reverend Al Sharpton, Melanie Campbell, Julianne Malveaux, and others, we stand together. We demand, we encourage, we advocate for the enactment of HR-40. Now is the time.
All right, our president of the National Urban League. All right, you see, I mean, people are on fire. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, you see what you started? I don't know if we've ever had a virtual rally like this. People from all across the country standing up under your leadership to carry us to the finish line and to the goalposts. And one of the persons who helped with this proposition was the Reverend Al Sharpton. Reverend Sharpton at his convention, I forget what year, it must have been maybe 20, whatever the year was. He asked every one of the presidential candidates, must have been 2020.
Yeah,
He called each of them because they all came to the National Action Network convention. He asked all of them, are you for HR-40? And they all said yes. And that was important because that signaled that reparations was no longer a marginal issue. And that put them on the record. It put the Democratic Party on the record. And that was an important step. And we certainly appreciate that. And most recently, I was privileged to travel with Congresswoman to the National Action Network convention, and she electrified them again. And he's been a staunch ally. So we take a minute now to welcome to this rally the man who always knows how to do a good rally, and that's none other than the Reverend Al Sharpton.
Hi, I'm Reverend Al Sharpton, president of National Action Network. We are certainly, unequivocally happy to be supportive of the move for HR-40 and why we can't wait. Let me be clear, as we fight around the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the John Lewis Voting Act, even though we have an executive order now around some policing issues, we need to move toward this legislation on policing on a federal level that would require all states to obey. But all of these are steps in the long journey toward really having a comprehensive commission on how America repairs us for the damage that was done to our ancestors. You must have reparations. How it will be formed, how it will be done, the commission can do that. But it must be unequivocal that all of us stand together. We may disagree on some things, we may have different tactics, but we all need to be repaired. I salute Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Dr. Ron Daniels for really being totally unwavering in their commitment toward getting this done. We stand with them and we will get it done. We can't wait.
All right, the Reverend Al Sharpton on board. All right, and saying we can't win. And you heard that passion, and we will. He didn't say we might. We kind of think we might. He said we will get it done. Well, this next speaker probably doesn't remember, but since Hilary was talking about his gray hair, and I don't have none. But see, I wear this kufi intentionally because I have a hole in my afro, so this is the way of disguising it. So that's what that's all about. So I go back a while with the next speaker, and I remember something called Operation Big Vote back in the day. Yes. Then it got transformed into what I consider our legacy organization on voting rights, the National Coalition for Black Civic Participation. And our next speaker heads that up, but she ain't stopped there. She is the architect and founder of the Black Women's Roundtable. And let me tell you something. They say when you have touched upon Black women, you have hit a rock. And Melanie Campbell, through the Black Women's Roundtable, everybody who's anybody is a part of that as women, and they do not be playing. And nor does our next speaker, Melanie Campbell. Mel, thank you so much for joining us. And let's hear what you have to say about HR-40. You've been with us all the way. And Luther continue, as Kamm say. You have the floor.
Hi there. Thank you, Dr. Daniels, Dr. Ron Daniels. I remember Operation Big Vote. We transformed it to unity and the whole idea of coming together, right? And we're stronger together than we are apart. And so I want to thank you for being so unwavering, not just about the issue of reparations, but the liberation of our people. And we don't get the hangs like we used to, but I think it's one of those, we're in a moment where we better hang close. And so thank the National African American Reparations Commission for inviting me to join this rally, right? Albeit virtual. And why it's important for us to stand together. I just want to love up on and thank Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who is my sister, our leader. I will be in a foxhole with her any day of the week because she is unwavering in being not just speaking truth to power, but living truth to power. And she will show up in times that you say, well, how did she manage to be 5 places in one day? But she will be there when the cameras are there, when the cameras aren't there, and it's consistent in your message. And so it was no way I wasn't going to find a way to make sure I wanted to be here just to feel it all and be here live. And I thank God that I'm able to be there. So thank you for leading the fight for HR-40, for the study of reparations for our people, and just thinking about how you took on that legacy. You were already there, but you took it. We said we run our race, and you run that race better than anyone I know when it comes to fighting for our people. And you grab that baton from Congressman John Conyers when he went on to be with the ancestors, and we're gonna keep that race moving forward. I think what's really critical is that we're living in a time that we're under attack. And if ever was a moment to understand why there's a need for HR-40, I believe it's now. As we look and see Hilary, the Justice Department put out a study not too long ago about the rise in hate crimes, the rise in domestic terrorism in this country. That here we are in 2022, and we could be shot down. Our grandmothers can be shot down in Buffalo, and all that's been happening, not just to African Americans, but there is the rise in hate crimes is mainly due to issues around race and ethnicity. And so we know that here we are not living in the past, but living in a kind of back to the future moment where you have people who don't believe that we should even talk about slavery in the classroom, that we shouldn't talk about Dr. King in the classroom. And it's no accident that even the impact and the attack on critical race theory has a connotation that says, we don't want to deal with you people. We want to move and put you back into modern day slavery. And so we have to, if we don't speak up loudly and focus ourselves around why HR-40 is important right now, we will be missing the boat. And I know this is not the conversation we're having today, but for those who may be thinking, well, why is that so important? Because it's important that we have built this country and we have never gotten our due. And the disparities that impact our community go back to slavery, go back to what never happened for our 40 acres and a mule. That's the reality, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, my sister, who can break it down more than anybody I know around the economic impact that it has had on our community for centuries. And so it's awesome, Congresswoman, I heard you say that color of change helped push to the next round. We have to connect all of the power and the infrastructure from legacy to new to not so new. It don't matter what. We all in the boat that they're gonna push us off the boat. We won't even make it back to Africa with some of these things that are happening in our community right now. So I'm just here to be a part of the choir and part of the fight to say that it is past time for us as a people to get our due. And HR-40 and the study of it and the Biden-Harris administration, if we can't get legislation, do executive action, do something come Juneteenth, so that our people understand, that you understand what's needed at this time in history in our country. So I thank you, God bless you, peace and power.
All right, you heard it from Melanie Campbell. Boy, this is getting, I hate y'all forgive me for speaking this broken up English, but it's getting gooder and gooder. I mean, this is just getting, and we got more to come in that regard. Let me just take a minute now to do two things. One, I just want to acknowledge organizations that are a part and give special shout outs to people who have played a central role in moving us forward. The Congresswoman mentioned some of them. I just want to take an opportunity quickly to mention some others. We've been meeting in fact, we're meeting Thursday, will be our 91st meeting. 91 weeks we've been meeting. And every time we started the meetings, people will attest to the fact that I wouldn't start the meeting until Kenneth Henry started the meeting. Kenneth Henry, who is the chair of the Legislative Commission for NCOBRA, is a phenomenal Black woman and a phenomenal person who knows how to go get them signatures. So I wouldn't start the meeting until Kenneth was there. And so Kenneth, we give you a salute for the work that you've done. And then have Dries and Heath. They got to sort of synergizing and working with each other. Certainly Human Rights Watch putting together, I think it was Dries' idea to take the Why We Can't Wait letter and to turn it into a letter that got hundreds of signatures. We are forever indebted to her. And of course, Nicole is no longer there. Nicole Austin Hilary is no longer there, but we got to give her a shout out too, because she was there at every step of the way and also worked on some key meetings that took place to help move this forward as well. Jerry and also the current director, Laura Pitter is also there. So we want to give them a shout out. Rania Batrice, who we brought to the table with a lot of communication skills, just leaped right in, working with getting open up the channels of communications, particularly with Cory Booker and others, and just a tremendous collective effort as we met to figure out and strategize how to get these signatures. The ACLU has already been mentioned. Got to give a big shout out to Jeff Robinson. I mean, we did with the National African American Reparations Commission, Dr. J and others. You remember we went to Charleston, South Carolina. We did a big piece on also on Tulsa. We also did a piece on the Japanese piece. They've been side by side working with us and selflessly. They didn't come forward wanting their name all over things and saying they had to be in the lead. They put their tremendous resources of the American Civil Liberties Union were put at the behest of this movement. And now they have the Who We Are Project with Jeff and Andrea Crabtree, and they have also come to the Congresswoman and said, how can we be helpful? How can this be used? And it is being used. And if you haven't heard of the Who We Are Project, you certainly need to, because they've done a wonderful job with the Who We Are Project. And Amanda has already been mentioned from Color of Change. We sort of appreciate them coming to the table. The Congresswoman invited them. They willfully joined in. And how can you forget the amazing, the inimitable, Nkechi Taifa? I mean, goodness gracious, TED Talk, all kind of talks, all over the news. I mean, goodness, multitasker par excellence. There's nobody like Nkechi Taifa. And by the way, worked at critical points to get the Congresswoman before bar associations and various groups, using her influence to get that in. So we thank you so much, Nkechi Taifa, with the Reparations Education Project. Keenan Keller doesn't get a whole lot of respect. You know, he just hangs around, but he's the guardian. He's been the guardian of the legacy of Congressman John Carter. Just got to give Keenan, Chief Counsel for the Judiciary, a shout out. And I'd be remiss if I also didn't give another one of the godfathers, Wade Henderson. Got to give him a shout out too, because he also at critical points brought the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights to the table, navigated. Sometimes we had little differences here. He worked through them, and you know how Wade is. Well, you know, we all got to work together, you know, and then Wade worked it out, and he played a pivotal role. We want to give all of them a shout out. So anyway, let's give them all a virtual round of applause. All of these organizations that have played a critical role. You saw the list of all of them, but I wanted to give a special shout out to them. Now, quickly, we want to take our reparations song to my producer, but we're not going to play the whole thing this time. We're just going to play about maybe a couple of minutes just to remind that it's time for reparations. That is our anthem. And then we're going to our next series of speakers, because we're going to be hearing from Dr. Amara Enyia, Julianne Malveaux, Erika Alexander, and you know we got to hear from Robin Ruth Simmons. So let's just see a little bit of It's Time for Reparations, and then we're going to introduce the rest of these speakers and hear our Congresswoman come back to give us our charge. We're rocking, we're rolling, we're moving with this virtual rally. It's time for reparations. Let's hear it.
It's time, it's time, it's time. I know it's time. The generation for reparation. Pay up, time to pay up. Reparation. Right now, reparations. Really honest, you know it's due. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, reparations. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, reparations. Time for reparations. Right now, time for reparations. Time for reparations. Right now, time for reparations. Reparations for building this nation. Lynching and burning, castration. Selling children, family separation. Right now, time for reparations. Millions of slave ships landed, whipped, chained, and branded. 300 years of free labor. We ain't asking for no favor. Time to pay. Right now, time for reparations. Time for reparations. Right now, time for reparations. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now,
All
reparations.
right. We got the point. We got the point. I just wanted to just get a little taste of it. You know what I mean? Because that's the anthem, and we're going to be shooting that out there. Now, it is my honor to introduce Dr. Amara Enyia. And she's with the Movement for Black Lives. But let me say this, and Kamm, you will remember this. The Movement for Black Lives played an instrumental role in the recrafting and redrafting of HR-40 from a study bill to a remedy bill. I should never forget, we had a major conference, with Danny Glover and others from all over the world in Atlanta. Delegation of about 9 or 10 people came from the Movement for Black Lives, and Nkechi Taifa played as kind of a liaison with them, and we talked back and forth, and we had a conversation, and we agreed that we wanted to move and shift HR-40 from a study to a remedy bill. They agreed, and representatives of the Movement for Black Lives were a part of that task force. So we want to give them their props. This bill is what it is today because of these courageous, visionary leaders who've come upon the stage, not only to talk about reparations as is, but to redefine it, to give it new meaning in terms of getting it all, because they don't want to leave nothing on the table. And so the person who is now representing them here is a great strategist and expert. I'm working with her on some other projects and learning a great deal from her. They call her Ace, and she is an ace because she is really strong and very powerful. Would you please welcome Dr. Amara Enyia? You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniels, for your expert stewarding of this event. I also want to thank our congresswomen who have represented and given powerful statements, as well as so many of the other speakers, people who I have watched over the years, respect, and have attempted to the best of my ability to follow in their footsteps. I think this is a really historic moment for us as a country, for us as Black people here in the United States and around the world. And you're absolutely right. We are refusing to leave anything on the table. And so the message from the Movement for Black Lives, which we represent hundreds of organizations around the country who are grassroots, who are frontline, Black-led, that are doing this work on the ground, that recognize that the urgency has never been more now than any time in the past. And that is the message that we have, that not only are we committed to a definition of reparations that repairs the harm from the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade to Jim Crow to the ongoing exploitation and extraction of Black people and our labor and our value here in the United States, that we knew that the remedy is where we would actually determine whether or not this country and its leadership has a commitment to the values that they claim to hold. And it is only through the acting, the organizing, the advocacy of so many on this call and those who perhaps couldn't make it to this rally that we have gotten to this point. And I think we need to own that. And we need to step boldly in that, because we have reached a point of no return. As many have said before in this broadcast, there's no going back. There is no watering down. There is no massaging the language of the text or our demands generally. We have, as they say, crossed the Rubicon. It means that there is no retreat and there is no surrender. The drumbeat for reparations is only going to grow because it is known and understood that the harms that have been committed have to be remedied, that it is the only way that this country can live up to the values that it purports. We have to be clear. There's no question about the harms. Where there has always been uncertainty or hesitance has been in the commitment to address those harms so that this country can move forward in the values that it claims. And that is why we are here today, recognizing the importance of this legislation, recognizing that this administration has made commitments and has a responsibility to go beyond rhetoric to action. And that we, representing the hundreds of organizations across the country and the communities that they serve, know that we cannot back down and we cannot accept anything less than our demands. And that what this legislation means and the work of actually moving toward repair so that this country can actually heal and progress. We have a fundamental belief that what is good for Black people is good for everyone. So this is not just in the interest of Black folks, this is in the interest of this very country. And as we look to people around the world who are having these same conversations, thinking about and moving toward a remedy for the vestiges of the transatlantic slave trade and of the systems that have been designed to continue that oppression, whether it's the economic systems, our financial systems, we have to incorporate all of this into our demand so that we have a holistic picture of what Black people are entitled to. And so we are continuing in this work. Our commitment has not wavered. It will not. And so if there are those who would erroneously think that this will sort of fade into the background or perhaps will lessen in its intensity with the next news cycle, let us just declare that that's not going to happen. that our enthusiasm is only growing, that our commitment is stronger by the day, that our unwillingness to back down, our unwillingness to settle only increases, that we are committed in this fight, that we're in it for the long haul, but more importantly, we recognize what we need to do in the short haul as well. And so we stand in solidarity with everyone that is on this call, with all of the advocates, the organizations that have been involved, those who have carried us to this moment. But most importantly, we stand in solidarity with Black folks who are living in their communities, in their neighborhoods, on their blocks, going to school, going to church, doing the things that we need to do, and looking for a pathway to where we can actualize our fullest potential and get what it is that is deserved in this country. And so with that, we want to thank all of you for your partnership, for your allyship, and for working alongside us as we push this closer and closer to our goal. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Amara Enyia, yes, ACE, all right, the Movement for Black Lives representing hundreds of organizations. And now she needs no introduction. I don't even know why I'm gonna give her one, but I guess if I don't give her introduction, I might get cussed out, and I don't wanna be cussed out publicly or privately, so. But she is Black America's leading political economist. She's an educator. She is the former president of Bennett College for Women. And then she just don't want to sit down nowhere. You know, she's sassy and, you know, and she just won't sit down. So now she's the inaugural dean of the University of California at Los Angeles' the inaugural dean of the Ethnic Studies program, because she won't sit down, right? She has a radio show and she's on NARC, and I remember her, and it was referenced by Camm Howard on that Juneteenth rally, that Juneteenth Juneteenth hearing, that millions of people saw. And who they saw was none other than our dear beloved sister who is on case, on point, Dr. Julianne Malveaux. You now have the floor.
Brother Ron Daniels, thank you so very much. I want to thank my sister Sheila Jackson Lee for all the work she's done on reparations, picking up the baton where John Conyers handed it to her and moving us to this place that we're in right now. Thank you so much, Sheila. I want to thank everybody. I mean, this is really, Ron Daniels, a tribute to you and to the fact that you work, I don't know when you sleep. You just celebrated your 80th birthday, and I said it would be greedy for me to say, let's have another 80. It would be greedy and impossible as well. But I don't know how we do anything without you bringing us all together. That's just a master craftsman. And I really, really, really appreciate it. And of course, your leadership with NARC, bringing us all together, coming from different places, you know, basically stirring the pot for us and helping us come up with that brilliant 10-point program. Reparations is not just about cash, y'all. It's also about repairing us, repairing what has happened. We used to have 123 Black-owned banks. Now we barely have 23. I could go down the list, but NARC has been a way for us to come together. And again, Dr. Daniels, we're all very grateful for you. Now, yeah, it was June 19th, 2019, when we had the hearing. Again, Sheila, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I get to say Sheila because she's my friend. Otherwise, I say Congresswoman. But thank you for bringing us together in that way and for allowing us to share Ta-Nehisi with his brilliant article in the Atlantic, so many others. And we also saw a slice of ignorance. We saw a couple of Republicans who didn't have good sense. And I'm not going to even waste my time. I only have 4 minutes. I'm not going to waste my time talking about fools. What I will say is that from June 19th, 2019 until now, we have made enormous progress in the reparations movement. What we've seen in that 3-year period, just short of 3-year period, we see now 217 co-sponsors. Along with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, we know this legislation can pass and must pass by Juneteenth. We've seen an increased awareness, and thanks to my sister, Robin Ruth Simmons, you'll hear from her later, we've seen local municipalities implementing reparations. We see the state of California with a reparations commission. So we see so much progress, and yet we see Buffalo. We see a crazy little white boy with the gun
Mm.
who decides to shoot down women. And I took that personally because it's no secret. It's in Wikipedia. I am 68 years old. Don't look it. Otherwise, if I looked it, I wouldn't tell it. But all I'm saying is these sisters were my age. These were elders. They were pillars of the community. Who goes around shooting up grandmas and stuff? Not that I'm a grandma, but just saying. Who walks into the grocery store? Who painstakingly finds a zip code where there are 70-some% Black people, and then finds a food desert and goes into a grocery store? Well, Buffalo is an extension of the economic envy that caused Tulsa to burn. It's an extension of the economic envy that caused 600 or more people in Wilmington, North Carolina to be killed. It is an extension of what happened basically when we talk about Elaine, Arkansas, when some brothers just tried to organize and therefore were killed, 200 of them. And so we can't wait because they don't wait. As soon as they see the slightest bit of Black economic progress or any other kind of progress, they go crazy. And they go crazy with their guns. They go crazy by unloosing their idiots. They know who these idiots are. Remember, y'all, maybe it was about 4 or 5 years ago, they called some of the Black identity extremists. Had a whole FBI investigation about Black identity extremists. I think I was on that list, actually, Dr. Daniels. But a lot of us, if we weren't, they would have thought we were. Have they ever studied white identity extremists? Have they ever studied these people who continue to kill our people? Or have they ever studied these crazy you-know-what cops? These crazy cops who think it's okay to put a knee on a neck. We can't wait because they won't wait. They will not wait to continue to attempt to extinguish us. They'll not wait to try to erase us. They talk about replacement theory. When they got here, American Indian people were a majority. Who got erased? They now represent 2% of the population. So that's why we can't wait. This is a moment of utter and absolute urgency, and we have to embrace it as such. That means that we have to ensure that Juneteenth is not just a celebration of what happened in Texas in 1865. It's going to be a celebration of what happens in Washington in 2022. We want this legislation. We want this legislation. We want this legislation. Joe Biden, do the right thing, dude. You can run into South Carolina, do the right thing. And not just Joe Biden, all y'all, do the right thing. It's time. This is not rhetoric, it's reality. We need to get paid. The wealth gap is alive and well. We have $1 for every $10 that white people have in wealth. Unacceptable, unacceptable, unacceptable. Amandla, thank you very much.
All right, Dr. Julianne Malveaux. Woo, woo. Well, I'm telling you, it is. Well, and we're driving towards conclusion. I mean, we got some folks that are dedicated to this virtual rally. This Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, she sure know how to organize a rally, get people fired up and ready to go. And now, one of the persons I first met her at the Juneteenth hearing. Didn't know who she was because I don't watch a lot of television. They said, well, Living Single, you didn't watch that? I said, well, maybe I heard about it, but I didn't. They said, oh, that's Erika Alexander. But she's not just an actress, she's an actor. And she went around the country documenting the struggle for reparations. And she has done a phenomenal job of doing so. Would you please now hear the presentation from none other than our actress and activist in the spirit of Danny Glover and others. We need more like her, Erika Alexander.
Hello, my name is Erika Alexander. I'm an actress and an activist. I'm also co-director of The Big Payback, a documentary film about reparations that follows the current movement of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's fight to pass HR-40, a bill to study and redress reparations for African Americans harmed by systemic issues stemming from slavery, and also featuring the work of former Alderwoman Robin Ruth Simmons, now founder of First Repair in Evanston, Illinois, who passed the first tax-funded reparations bill in America for Black citizens in her city. Both women have been tremendous advocates for this issue, and we are grateful that they and many other warriors allowed us to watch history in the making and educate us about their work and what is at stake. Reverend Barber famously proclaimed this period in time, right now, as a third Reconstruction. So this means this is the time to rebuild America's foundation as it should have been since Reconstruction. He knows that that can't be possible without looking at the moral and monetary obligation, which certainly includes the advancement and implementation of reparations towards the descendants of enslaved Africans. I believe this may be our last chance to create America for all Americans, not as it was originally designed to be in a constitution drafted solely by white men, but a nation built by Americans, as it should have always been, together. I've learned a heck of a lot documenting this process and meeting so many terrific people. I've also experienced and witnessed a reparations movement that is robust and gaining strength, and been part of an emerging story whose time has come. Our film, The Big Payback, chosen to premiere in this year's prestigious Tribeca Film Festival, is a clear sign that HR-40 should be enacted now. Yes, now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of their country. And women and men of all colors will be needed to make the change that delivers this justice and appropriate remedies. Thank you for this opportunity. And thanks to all those who work in grassroots and established organizations doing this difficult work as you discover powerful ways to work together. And thanks for the leadership of NAACP, First Repair, Ms. Simmons, and the work of Congresswoman Lee and her colleagues in Congress. We can get there together. We must achieve reparations now.
All right. Well spoken by Erika Alexander. And now, we almost there. Woo, we almost there. And now you heard her referenced several times. She hails from Evanston, Illinois. The Congresswoman may not know this, but I actually met her at a session of the Congressional Black Caucus's annual legislative conference. And she came, actually, one of her assets is she had the vision, she knew what needed to happen, but she said, I may need a little help figuring this out. So she came, and now I work for Robinson Crusoe. I mean, no, anyway, she got us all tied up and working on Evanston. She is amazing. She is an amazing, brilliant, courageous, and yet humble leader who is the architect with other stakeholders of the Evanston Reparations Initiative, which has become a replicable model that people not only all over the country, but the world are looking at. And she is a dear friend and a strong supporter of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and all of us. We now turn the floor over to none other than Robin Ruth Simmons of First Repair. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Daniels. And thank you to everyone in the remarks that came before me. It is just such an honor to be even in service with you all. I'm very grateful to be here. Good afternoon and reparations now. I'm feeling empowered today to be in the fight for reparations with so many of you bold and hardworking leaders. And leaders includes everyone prioritizing solutions, advancing reparations. Together, we are reaching new milestones daily. Many thanks to Erika Alexander and her partners for amplifying the case and the demand for reparations. Erika, your commitment to social justice and reparations has been a shining example of selflessness, integrity, and your audacity. I believe that you have set an example for others to use their platforms and their influence in the same way for justice. Thank you for your many contributions, including your podcast and the forthcoming documentary. Together, under the fearless leadership of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, we have pushed HR-40 to pass Judiciary Committee and its current position of 218 co-sponsors and yes votes in the House. We cannot wait. We cannot wait to unite. We cannot wait to stay organized. We cannot wait to continue passing local initiatives. We cannot wait to speak our truth and voice our demands. We cannot wait any longer for HR-40. Although we are brilliant and resilient and innovative, we have been in a struggle for 403 years in this nation, centuries of trauma and plunder. Passing HR 40 is an absolute emergency. Congresswoman Jackson Lee is doing her part, fights for us daily and the overall wellness of this nation every day, tirelessly. Our next immediate expectation of this Congress and President Biden in response to the harms and the crimes against Black people is the passing of HR 40. I stand with thousands of local elected and community leaders in active solidarity. We represent over 100 communities all over this nation. We represent cities and states, institutions that are in support of reparations and expect our Congress to pass HR 40. There are now over 400 forms of local reparations in practice, and it's currently being mapped by the African American Redress Network. You can learn more at their website. Evidence of our active commitment to HR 40 is passing and practicing local initiatives. I want to recognize stakeholder leaders and allies doing their work. We have been convening in person and virtually in our collective goals. And our ultimate goal is HR 40. We know full well how important our work is, but there is no version of our local efforts that will remedy even the local harm. Anything less than a federal reparations commission is insufficient. Thank you to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee for your incredible leadership. Thank you to Dr. Ron Daniels and the entire HR 4 strategy group for meeting for now 91 weeks this week. Thank you again, Dr. Daniels, for your long history in the struggle and the convening of NAACP. I also want to be sure to give honor to all those that have made this moment in history possible. The elders and the ancestors are responsible for this moment and momentum in the reparations movement. Reparations now.
All right, let's give it up for Robin Ruth Simmons. Oh my God, yes, 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 yes. So Congresswoman, you see what you started? You got all this started now. So now we're at the conclusion of, I think, my goodness, what a remarkable rally. I mean, a virtual public rally. You said you wanted us to create some positive buzz, and that positive buzz was going to move things forward. We said, okay, we're trying to figure this out. And so it was your idea, and we pulled it all together. So we now turn to you for our marching orders before we have our benediction. So Congresswoman, again, we turn it to our courageous visionary leader, the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee.
Dr. Daniels, let me add my name to the litany of applause and accolades that you have generated, not in this virtual rally, but for decades. And then let me call the names, as we typically do, call the ancestors and or the broad family. So before I end, let me thank you, Gary Hines, brilliant musician, Reverend Audreia Alexander. Let me thank Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Camm Howard, Hilary Shelton, Marc Morial, Reverend Al Sharpton, Melanie Campbell, Dr. Amara, Enyia, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, Erika Alexander, Robin Ruth Simmons, and Miss Joan Neal, who will come afterwards, but as well, all those named and unnamed, you know who you are. And let me be very clear. We did not hold this rally to take a long arm to applaud ourselves or to reach on our back and pat ourselves. This is informational. And always I have felt it imperative to say thank you. 2 simple words, thank you. And in our African tongue, in many different ways, whether it's Swahili or otherwise, we want to say thank you. We're taught by the ancestors to say thank you. How many thank yous could the slaves have given for the brutality that they experienced? So I want to start by saying thank you to the co-sponsors and supporters of HR 40, who come from all economic backgrounds, all racial backgrounds as members of Congress, and all over the nation. We have made an enormous stride. Let me thank the 350 plus organizations, the religious organizations, the rabbis, Muslims, Buddhists, and of course, all of the social justice organizations. We have left no one out. Let me thank the state of California, the 42 other cities, and the names of those that Robert Ruth Simmons has been able to galvanize. And she is a sojourner. She's Sister Sojourner. And we are grateful that she has engaged with cities and mayors, and they have come aboard. Let me thank the U.S. Conference of Mayors, who endorsed the big mayors, big city mayors, who endorsed HR-40, even calculated the financial aspect. But as has been said, when you talk about developing reparation proposals, let that not be toxic. Let it not be the third rail. Let it not be that when we begin to discuss racism or race in America, that it becomes the negative, such as a critical race theory. Let us implode that. Let us get people to understand our history and to value it, and let our children start to grow up and feel comfortable with the question of race and the value of diversity and the richness of history of slaves and the descendants of enslaved Africans. You will never improve the future if you do not know the past. And so one of the things HR-40 will do is to teach us and lead us and give us empathy and bring us together no matter what our race, color, or creed. Let us proudly discuss these issues. Let us not hide behind these issues. Let us not only find the opportunity for someone different from me to mention it in Black History Month. Let us openly and boldly talk about HR-40, the Commission to Study Slavery and Develop Reparation Proposals. Let the world see us. Let the continent of Africa, the largest continent, growing continent, it will be the largest in the world soon. And where will the nexus be? It'll be us, to connect to the beauty of the continent. How advantaged America will be to have us connect to the largest continent in the world and maybe the richest for the natural resources that it has. Dr. Daniels has known this from his pre-days of understanding the connection between Mandela, Kenyatta, Nkrumah, and others. The connection. And so my call to action is, first of all, to ensure that we speak without shame. We don't have doubts in our discussion about HR-40. We view it as a comprehensive healing ability for this nation. It is as important in Idaho as it is in Mississippi. It is as important in Iowa as it is in New York. It's as important in Michigan and Missouri as it is in Texas and Louisiana. It is as important as it is in Rhode Island and Maine and Mass, as it is in the deep parts of the South, from Georgia to Alabama, from South Carolina to North Carolina and beyond. It is not regional, it is national. It is a recognition of what the nation did. And we ask, as the nation has done for our friends, the Japanese Americans, who are so much a champion, as they have tried to do when there have been honor and heroism, such as our soldiers and the GI Bill, then these kinds of actions of solution are relevant. And my call to action is this: June 19th is our target, our date. Those of you here, network yourself, raise up your voices, appeal to the United States Congress and the White House for a passage, an executive order for this to become law. Raise your voices, connect a chain of connectedness. Let me see what region has the most emails and Twitter that says, what is this happening? There's something being raised up pointing toward Juneteenth, the day of justice and reparation. Let us make sure that we are voting, getting ready for November 2022 with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Again, let us make sure that everyone knows that we have worked hard and we did come up with a police reform package signed by President Biden. Thank you, President Biden. Now the perfect mix and match is HR-40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals. There is no more waiting. The time is now, Juneteenth 2022. And all of you who are planning your Juneteenth, please recognize that I love you having a good time. But my heart, my soul, my reason for being, for pushing the Juneteenth, for being the first member to introduce the legislation that ultimately was the federal bill and the federal law, was to honor, was to acknowledge that they, the slaves, the ancestors, never got a thank you, never got an acknowledgement. So when you do your Juneteenth, have a moment of somberness, sacredness, singing music, reading about them, poetry, words over them, and say thank you for building America and giving me a platform and a soul and a spirit of which I stand. I would not be who I am had there not been the ancestors to stand up. If they had not had the strength to carry on, to stand, to not just dissolve, they kept on building and picking cotton and being enslaved. They kept on keeping on. And so what can we do? I want to see a wave of tweets, emails to the Congress, to the White House. I want to be able to say thank you to this wave, this tsunami, this mountain of Americans from all backgrounds pushing for HR-40. That's the action of today. Don't be silent. Hold press conferences in your respective communities. Let the sound get to Washington that you are pushing. And as I know that we will see Opal Lee, who's the grandmother of Juneteenth, she was a justice, or she is a justice fighter. That'll be a gift for her as well.
Yes.
Sister Opal, mother, grandmother, you are going to get an extra gift because we know how you have toiled. I'm the godmother, I'd like to think, but I can't step in the way of the grandmother of Juneteenth. Let's give her a gift of the victory, Dr. Daniels. And so my call to action is no silence after we end this today. And they've got the roadmap, we've given it to them. They can do their own press conference. They can have church meetings. They can meet with the various sororities and children's groups. They can tell stories, storytelling. Tweet it out what you're doing and let the wave push us to a signed HR-40 into law by an executive order on June 19, 2022. Let me feel you. Let me see you moving. Let me raise you up. I want to see headlines in the local papers. Reparations summit today. Reparations press conference today. Church meeting today. Children meeting today. Storytelling today in the name of HR-40. As they say in the church, to God be the glory. But all faiths are to be blessed. And remember, the Constitution belongs to us. And HR-40 exudes itself out of this book. That's all we're doing. And all that we will accomplish will be for the greater good of this nation. Thank you all so very much.
All right. We got our marching orders. We're fired up and ready to go. We go back to Reverend Herbert Daughtry. He said, "I fired up, can't take no more." We're gonna go back to some of them old slogans, or whose streets, our streets, and Reverend Sharpton's slogan as well. We're gonna put all of those together and get it done. What a remarkable rally. And of course, there will be a webinar this evening that is going to be sponsored on racial justice and reparations sponsored by the Network Lobby. And when Lily Connie, who is the Deputy Chief of Staff for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, saw this notice, she grabbed me, she said, we need to reach out and make sure that person is on the program, because that's a nice compliment. I said, well, I'll do the best I can. And we did. We were blessed to be able to reach out and to have Miss Joan Neal come. And we ask you to come forward now for your concluding remarks and a benediction to this remarkable.
Alex, go to them and let them know I'm on my way. I'll be there in about 5 minutes, okay?
Congresswoman is still busy.
Are people there?
Congresswoman is still busy. But anyway, you have the floor. We'll find a way. Can we mute the Congresswoman as you provide the benediction? Thank you so much for joining us for this occasion. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniels. It is an honor and an humbling experience to be here with all of you, and certainly with the Congresswoman. I want to thank you for putting this rally together. I want to thank all of the participants for your contributions and for the challenging and inspiring words that we have heard this afternoon, especially from Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and from Congresswoman Barbara Lee. It is clear, it is really clear that we are at a moment of opportunity, perhaps even a Kairos moment where the people of God and all the people of goodwill are being called to step forward in faith, to stand in the breach between an unjust past and present and an equitable future, to right a wrong, to bring justice at last for America's original sin. And so let us pray for the success of our cause. Almighty and eternal God, we stand before you today at the end of this gathering on reparations and racial justice with humble hearts, but steadfast determination. For we know that justice is what you demand. Your prophet Micah told us, "What does the Lord require of you, O human, but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God?" So today we are gathered in this space to say to our country once more that now is the time for you to do justice. Now is the acceptable time, America, to repent of the sin of slavery and the lasting impact of racism, segregation, and exploitation. Now is the time for you as a country to admit your sin, to ask for forgiveness, and to make recompense for the devastating and enduring harm you have inflicted on your fellow citizens simply because of the color of our skin. God, you know, we have been in this struggle far too long. Like the widow in the gospel, year after year, we have called upon our government to do the right thing. And year after year, they have turned a blind eye and a hardened heart. But we did not let that stop us, and we cannot be turned around now. The voices of our ancestors cry out for recompense, for reparations, and for reconciliation. Now is the time, America, to make good on the promise of justice and freedom for all, especially for those you robbed so long ago and continue to subjugate. We will not wait any longer. Our cause is just and our determination firm. And today, we have heard a word from you, O God, that gives us hope that finally, maybe finally, this time, we will succeed. Oh God, we know that we cannot do anything without you, but we also know that all things are possible with you. So God, as we go forth from this gathering, renewed and recommitted to the cause of reparations, may we add our voices to your demand for justice. May we be the catalyst that finally gets this country to take the first step toward reparatory and restorative justice by passing HR-40 and opening the way for reparations for the harm our community has suffered, so that we as a country may finally move beyond this shameful history and toward the beloved community you desire for all of us. This is our call today. May you give us your grace sufficient for the task. And may you, the God of our Lord and brother Jesus Christ, bless us all in this work and in all that we do. May we all go in peace, my friends. Alleluia, alleluia. The time is now. Amen.
And what a beautiful prayer. Dr. Daniels, I just want to just thank this beautiful woman of God for this amazing prayer that she's going to give us wind and wings. And if I might add in my thanks as I sign off, the millions of young people, young brothers and sisters who were the wind of pushing HR-40 on their college campuses across America. I don't want us to end without saying that they are not our tomorrows, they are our todays. God bless them. But more importantly, I get energy from the young brothers and sisters who carried this forward as well. Thank you, sister, for your beautiful prayer. Thank you.
All right, well, that concludes our rally for today. We thank you so much for joining us, and we're waiting for you to make that tsunami. I like that. You see how the Congresswoman gives us the way to move forward. So we thank you so much for joining this historic virtual rally today.